The life and layout of a medieval castle. Many medieval castles are still standing today, giving modern visitors a glimpse of what it might have felt like to live like royalty centuries ago. In places like Wales, which has more castles per square mile than any other country in Europe, you can practically walk into one by accident. But castles weren't only homes for kings and queens. Most were owned by powerful lords, and each castle functioned like a mini-town enclosed within its walls. Inside, you'd find nobles, servants, shopkeepers with their stalls, soldiers, armories, treasuries, livestock, kitchens, banquet halls, prison cells, and more. A castle had to serve many purposes. It needed to look grand and impressive, worthy of the ruler it represented. But it also had to operate as a fortress, strong, intimidating, and able to protect the surrounding land from attacks. Because of this, medieval castles were built in layers, each part serving a different role, much like peeling an onion. How medieval castles began. Before the Middle Ages came the Romans, and the Romans built forts. These old military bases became the foundation for many early medieval castles. During the medieval period, conflict was everywhere, so protecting land and people was a top priority. Monarchs and lords often reused abandoned Roman forts as starting points for new defenses. The first true castle designs were the motte-and-bailey castles of the 9th and then 10th centuries. They were simple, a mound of raised earth, the motte, with a wooden fence or wall around it, and a courtyard area, the bailey, beside it. Over time, wood gave way to stone, leading to the strong, iconic stone castles we think of today. These early structures became the blueprint for the classic medieval castle. We picture medieval castles today, largely because of Disney movies. But the real story behind these massive stone giants is even more dramatic. When feudalism took hold across Europe, lords needed a way to control their land and protect the people living on it. Their solution? Enormous fortified homes that eventually became the classic castles we know today. Location was everything. Across Britain and coastal Europe, castles were often placed near seas, rivers, or lakes. That wasn't for the view, it was to spot incoming ships early and ensure a reliable supply of fresh water. If attackers couldn't cut off your water during a siege, you stood a much better chance of surviving. Many castles were also built on high ground. A hilltop position was like having medieval radar. From up there, you could watch the landscape for miles and see enemies long before they arrived. And when battle finally came, defenders had a huge advantage. Firing downward is far easier and far more effective than charging uphill while exhausted. Building the fortress, because hilltop castles rested on rocky outcrops. They often didn't have the classic water-filled moat you see in movies. But many others did, especially in Wales. Moats weren't just obstacles, they were strategic tools. Their job was to slow down attackers, trap them, and make them easy targets for archers on the walls. And here's the dark side. During a siege, defenders sometimes poisoned the moat on purpose, dumping in infected animal remains or even bodies to spread disease among anyone who tried crossing. But the real backbone of any castle's defenses was its outer wall. Thick, high, and armed with towers, it was the first line of protection. Archers and early artillery were stationed along the top, ready to rain down arrows or stones on attackers. Most castle walls reached around 30 feet high, but some like the one at Framlingham Castle rose up to about 40 feet as military technology evolved. Many castles added a second wall inside the first, creating another defensive ring enemies had to break through before reaching the heart of the stronghold. But just like the Death Star had its weak spot, medieval castles had one too, the gates. No matter how thick the walls were, the entrance was always the most vulnerable point, and armies knew it. Castle walls might have been thick and intimidating, but gates were always the weak spot. They simply couldn't match the strength of a 30 or 40-foot solid stone wall. which is why attackers constantly targeted them. To protect this vulnerable point, many castles added a portcullis, a heavy iron lattice that could be slammed down instantly, creating a second barrier behind the wooden doors. While the outer walls didn't contain many rooms, they did hold one of the most fragrant parts of medieval life, the garderobe, aka the castle toilet. Hygiene mattered in a world where disease spread fast, but no one wanted a medieval bathroom anywhere near where they slept or ate. So toilets were usually placed in latrine towers, built into the outer wall itself. Perched on a wooden seat high above the ground, waste would drop through a chute and away from the residence. These towers popped up not just on the walls, but inside other buildings too, like the barracks or even the prison. And if you ever visit Killy Castle, you can actually step into one of these medieval bathrooms and experience what it was like to do your business with a view. Once you move past the outer defenses, you reach the heart of castle life. Inside the inner courtyard, called the bailey, stood the stone keep, the centerpiece of the entire fortress. This was the lord's residence, the most comfortable and decorated part of the castle. It was where meals were served, guests were welcomed, and daily life unfolded. And if everything else fell to an invading army, the keep became the last refuge, its thick stone walls hopefully strong enough to endure the siege. Inside the keep, you'd find the great hall, where the household ate and entertained nobles, the treasury, where taxes and valuables were stored, and even a room for the castle's doctor, whose top medical tools were, yes, jars of leeches. But a castle was more than just a home for the lord. It was an entire ecosystem. Many keeps were decorated with rich tapestries and carvings. Some, like Stirling Castle in Scotland, were fit for kings and queens. Larger castles could even grow into miniature towns, like Castillo de Gibralfaro in Spain, which housed merchants, craftsmen, and traders behind its walls. Other essential buildings filled the complex: a chapel, living quarters for servants, barracks for soldiers, stables, livestock pens, and of course, a prison for anyone unfortunate enough to cross the ruling lord. And whether you were in Britain, France, Spain, or anywhere else in medieval Europe, the blueprint barely changed. Castles followed a consistent pattern, becoming the centerpieces of the towns they protected. Their massive walls weren't just military structures. They were symbols of power, wealth, and authority, a message carved in stone for all to see. Attack if you want, but you won't take this place